Hello and welcome to South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. I'm your host, Reggie Hall. It's springtime across South Carolina. That means farmers are out in the field planting their spring and summer commodities. It also means there's a potential clash with wildlife across the state as they cause depredation to a number of the crops. Thankfully, farmers have an outlet in DNR biologists and others to help remedy their cause. We'll talk about that and more coming up. Plus, we'll meet our outstanding farmer in the field. We'll go to our favorite restaurant, and we'll close, as always, with our Palmetto portraits. Stay tuned. We'll see you in just a moment. Welcome back to South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. Hunting in South Carolina, as in most other southern states, is big business, thanks in large part to the great outdoors and wildlife habitat maintained by South Carolina farmers. In fact, for many farmers, collecting leases for hunting rights is an added income for the farm. Some studies show that hunters have a $2.7 billion positive impact on South Carolina's economy, which includes hunting shows, supplies, gun and ammo purchases, and other investments related to the sport. Charles Ruth is a biologist with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources.
Perhaps behind hunters and sportsmen, farmers are the ones that are right there in conservation as well. They're providing cover, they're providing food.
Even though farmers benefit from hunting, there are times when the worlds of wildlife and farming collide. Those are the times when wildlife walk on the wild side of agriculture. They destroy fields and eat into an already very narrow profit margin farmers struggle to earn. Today, major problem species on South Carolina farms include a growing population of black bears, coyotes, and wild or feral hogs. 20 to 30 years ago, the farmers' biggest problem seemed to be a large and growing deer population. But groups like the South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation and South Carolina Department of Natural Resources and others worked together to develop programs to manage the deer population.
Our situation in South Carolina now is much better. And I'd like to think that some of the programs that our agency's been involved in affording, hunters or farmers, whichever way you want to look at it, because they're oftentimes one and the same, these programs have provided them with the opportunity to manage, in this case, deer on their property. Harvesting antlerless deer is important, not only from if you're trying to protect soybeans or cotton or whatever it may be, in limiting the numbers of deer, but from a biological standpoint, from a deer management standpoint, it's very important. Again, we dealt for nearly 30 years with a very rapidly increasing deer population. It can't go on like that forever. Really, if you look at the modern history of deer, we're not talking about a very long time. 30, maybe 40 years. In the first part of that, there was no damage because there weren't that many deer, and then it ramped up. But yeah, and I think farmers have learned, and it may be a chicken or the egg argument based on, is it deer damage causing them to shift certain practices, or is it the market?
And just when farmers felt things were under control and deer were no longer the nuisance they once were, along came the feral hogs, bred from once domestic pigs brought here centuries ago.
These are old world animals. They are not native to North America. And of course, a lot of people don't understand that. These animals are not from this continent originally. They probably initially got here in the 1500s. In fact, one account has DeSoto, when he made his trip up from Florida up through the southeast, when he crossed the Savannah River around Augusta, of course, they had hogs with them. Well, when they were crossing the river, some of these hogs got away, and that's been 500 years ago nearly. That established that historic population in the lower Savannah River.
Wild hogs are prolific animals, breeding a couple of times a year with an average of 3 litters every 2 years, adding 5 to 7 wild hogs with each litter. Unlike programs designed to manage the deer population and ease crop damage from deer, wild hogs are an entirely different story.
Hogs are very difficult to deal with from a damage management standpoint. Obviously hunting. Let's remove these animals in conjunction with deer hunting or special hog hunts. But the studies on hog damage and management have shown that hunting alone is probably not going to get you where you need to be unless you're working on a founding population and you get on them right away. But where you've got reasonably high numbers of hogs that are established, trapping, that's the #1 technique that you're going to use, followed by hunting with dogs.
That's fresh. That must have been last night.
Merle Powell of Hemingway, South Carolina, is all too familiar with the damage wild hogs can cause to a farm.
Look across over there, out over yonder, that side's awful. I mean, it looks like it's been, flat field's been cultivated. In the winter, you'll see a lot of earthworms and stuff. They love earthworms. The last couple of years, we got a real big problem with the hogs. They destroy our crop. It's awful. You can see the rooting in the fields. We'll plant a crop, they'll destroy it. We'll try to fix it back, and they'll tear it back up. We've been building hog traps here lately. We've caught a right good many. In fact, we've got several. In fact, I've got 1 or 2 retired people that's been sitting in my fields and trying to get rid of some of them. But the problem, these hogs will come and stay a day or two, and they'll leave. You think you got them gone, and one night they'll show up and they'll eat up another acre or 2. And we don't know what the solution is, but we got to find a solution because they're going to put us out of the farming business.
The South Carolina Farm Bureau Federation, a non-profit membership organization open to anyone who supports the work of family farmers and rural lifestyles in South Carolina, has worked for years to bring farmers, wildlife biologists, and legislators together to try and solve problems that eat into the farmer's bottom line. Gary Spires is Farm Bureau's Director of Government Relations.
When we were working with the deer situation, our folks are very engaged with their land, and they're very observant, to a point where I think they help the biologists at Wildlife Department, the Department of Natural Resources, understand some of the habits and movements and things like that just by their observation, and then they communicate that with us, and we would have meetings with biologists and folks from DNR, and I think it gave them a perspective, because DNR folk, they can't be out there all the time, but our folks are, and I think that helped with the deer situation. The best way we can help is to keep that communication up, and our folks continue to tell us and tell DNR and tell legislators where they're having a problem.
And that's just what farmers and others are doing as the South Carolina General Assembly works to strengthen laws, making it illegal to transport wild hogs into or around the state, which would help keep the wild hog population from spreading so quickly. Farm Bureau member and row crop farmer Donnie Wakefield testified recently before a state Senate subcommittee looking into the proposed legislation.
I don't know how to begin to tell you how much time and money we spend on this problem. It's 3-4 days a week, half the night running around just checking your crops. We're losing probably in the neighborhood of 35 to 40 acres of corn a year. Doesn't sound like too much, but at today's income and in today's expenses, that's a great deal of money.
Wakefield had never testified at the State House before a legislative body, but he's glad he did.
It certainly was an educational experience for myself. It makes me certainly have a greater understanding of what everybody in Farm Bureau does. You always hear about it, but you never, until you've seen it, you never appreciate it.
Dave Bowman, a wildlife consultant, testified before the same state Senate subcommittee, considering a bill to make trap and transport of feral hogs illegal.
This problem is getting worse every year, and it's primarily because people are moving these hogs around. There's some natural expansion involved, but most of it is related to trap and transfer of wild hogs.
In addition to problems caused in fields by hogs rooting up the ground, they're also known for carrying certain diseases which can spread to domestic herds.
And in the southeast, the diseases of hogs that would be interesting either to the hog producer or the hunter are brucellosis and pseudorabies. And primarily, and it's been documented. I mean, this is old news. Depending on where you are in the Southeast, including South Carolina, it's out there. It's endemic in certain areas, both of those diseases. From a hunting standpoint, everybody always says you need to wear protection when you're cleaning any kind of game, and that's true. It's even more so true with hogs because, these diseases are blood-borne. An eye splatter, inhalation, a drop of blood in the mouth, cuts on your hands and so forth. So, if you're dealing with wild killed hogs, definitely wear the rubber gloves, maybe some safety glasses and things like that.
It's hard to believe they can do this much damage in one night.
Welcome back to South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. Time now for our regular South Carolina cooking segment, this time from the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Greenville, South Carolina, where we find the Blue Ridge Brewing Company on the town's trendy Main Street.
Blue Ridge has been here for 15 years. We, of course, our brewery, we brew 4 of our own beers, which is the 4 we keep on tap all the time. Plus, we try to keep 2 seasonals and have a wide selection of menu items, including wild game, from pizzas, sandwiches, steaks, to anything, kids' meals, everything, something to satisfy everyone.
It's only fitting, we thought, that in an episode of Voices of Agriculture focusing on wildlife, we should feature a South Carolina restaurant that serves, well, wildlife. One of the more requested items on the restaurant's menu is the Wild Game Sampler, from which patrons can choose any 3 of a selection of fresh venison, antelope, quail, rabbit, buffalo, wild boar, or duck breast.
We make everything from scratch, such as our ketchup, mustard, our kitchen, and whatnot. We chef-rich marinades. We make our own marinade sauces.
Let's go into the kitchen to find out what the chef has cooking up for us today.
Hi, welcome to Blue Ridge Brewing Company here in Greenville, South Carolina. We're going to do a small demonstration of some game meats. Some of the things we use here are local to our area. We've got some fresh rabbit that we're going to cook today. We've also got some quail from the low country, and a little bit of wild boar is going to be thrown in as well. We do a lot of game meat here at the restaurant. We're a brew pub, so we do a lot of neat things. We try and incorporate beer and pair those with our game meats. So this ought to be fun and interesting. Today we're going to do a dry rub with some wild boar. Real simple wild boar rub. A little bit of salt, a little bit of cumin, a little bit of paprika. It's about 2 parts paprika, 1 part cumin, and 1 part salt. You might want to go a little easier on the salt. It really doesn't need that much. These are very small boar chops. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to take some of our Manchester quail right here. We can do this a couple of different ways. I've got a basting sauce. We're going to marinate one of these real quick. I'm going to show you a quick little recipe that we do. We take a little bit of red wine, a little bit of balsamic vinegar, about equal parts. I want to throw a little cracked pepper in here as well. A little bit of chopped onion, a little fresh chopped garlic. And then what we're going to do to knock the acidity off of that balsamic vinegar, we're going to add a little bit of dark brown sugar to kind of give it a little bit of body, a little bit of flavor. We're going to marinate this really quick. You can do this up to overnight, but you don't want to get too terribly heavy with this marinade. It is kind of strong. The flavors are delicate on the quail. You want to preserve those. Our rabbit that we're going to also do, we'll prepare this just very simply. I've got a nice little, like a basting sauce, basting vinaigrette that we're going to just dab on here before we put it on the grill. This is simple oil and vinegar. There's some soy sauce, garlic, and a little bit of Creole seasoning in here. This rabbit will go on first. We're going to need a little bit extra cooking time for it. We may actually just do a little finish in the oven. Not too terribly hot on the grill, because that sugar will burn. You want to caramelize it a little bit, that's fine, but we'll go a little easy on the heat. All right, the last thing we're going to put on the grill is our wild boar. We're going to take these, we're going to cook these relatively quick. We don't want to do too much heat to them. These are relatively thin, they're delicate. There's not a tremendous amount of fat on here. We got some nice color right there. Here's our other quail we've got marinated up. And you notice, you see how that sugar in there really caramelized up nicely. We'll take a little bit more of that marinade and let's baste that on there real good. We get that nice flavor in there, and that'd be your quick marinade on there. To allow this rabbit to get cooked through without hurting the outside, we're going to transfer this into the oven. Just into a skillet. Keep this simple. Add a little bit of wine, a little bit of water, a little bit of chicken stock, anything you like, and we'll just finish that up in the oven for a little while. Okay, we're going to put the last finishing touch on our quail dish right here. We've got our marinated quail, and then our basted quail we do with our simple vinaigrette. All this is garnished out really nice, looks pretty, but simple preparations. We really like to keep it like this. You can dress it up. There's really no big deal here. I think you really enjoy it. Try some of these recipes or experiment on your own. Wild game is really not that far out there. Most of the flavors of what you can buy in the grocery store or you can order online are relatively mild. The flavor of the game's there. They're not real strong. They're not real gamey. So don't be afraid to step it out there a little bit and try some different meats. It's a nice way to change up what's for dinner.
Welcome back to South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture.
I am Chalmers Carr. I'm the owner and operator of Titan Farms here in Edgefield County, South Carolina. We operate 4,000 acres of peaches, 300 acres of bell pepper. We also do broccoli, watermelons, and cantaloupes. Got into the peach industry through my mother's family, third generation on that side. So growing up, as I moved around in the military, I got to go back home on the farm during the summer, and from that point, I got experience doing it and fell in love with it, and that's what I've been doing ever since. South Carolina is the #2 peach producing state in the country. We follow California, and a lot of people call Georgia the peach state, but South Carolina is larger than Georgia. In fact, we're almost twice as large as Georgia in peach production. About 80% of the peaches grown in South Carolina are grown right here in the ridge in about a 10-mile radius from right here, and we're one of the largest operations in South Carolina. My involvement with Farm Bureau has been long-standing, and when I was in Florida, I was involved with it there, but since returning to South Carolina, I've definitely gotten involved with it, not only at the county level, but have been fortunate enough to serve as a state chairman of the Labor Committee. I encourage people to get involved. There was an old adage that somebody told me that those people that show up to meetings make the rules, and those that don't just have to live with them. So be involved, be a part of it.
Welcome back to South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. Well, our time's about up for South Carolina's installment of Voices of Agriculture. Thanks for watching. We hope you've learned how we've presented the story of wildlife and farmers and how they coexist on the farm to cut down on the depredation in the field, thanks to wildlife biologists from the Department of Natural Resources. We also hope you enjoyed meeting our farmer out standing in the field, going to our local favorite restaurant, and watching the beautiful palmetto portraits. If you're interested in these stories or more, please log on to our website, www.scfb.org. Until next time, I'm your host, Reggie Hall.